Russian President Vladimir Putin arrives in New Delhi for the 23rd India-Russia annual summit on December 4th. On the surface of this, it looks like a summit of old friends, but behind the pomp lies a relationship driven by hard security needs, energy, as well as a delicate balancing act with none other than Washington. That's right. First up, let's understand why Moscow remains strategically important to New Delhi. Now, there are Su-30s, S400 missiles as well as oil tankers. We'll tell you all about that. From fighter squadrons to fuel tankers, the India-Russia relationship runs deep. In New Delhi this week, the focus will be on unfinished defense deliveries, growing energy trade, and a shared comfort with strategic autonomy, even as India courts the United States. Here's how the pillars stack up. India's armed forces still wear a large Russian imprint. Decades of agreements, licensed production and joint projects have left the Indian Air Force, the Indian Army and the Indian Navy dependent, to say the least, on Russian platforms that are often cheaper to operate and easier to maintain, and for which India has built domestic sustainment capabilities. Now, for the Indian Air Force, fighter jets like the Su-30 Mk1 are tailored for India and produced under the transfer of technology arrangements. These serve as the backbone of the Indian Air Force. The fleet runs into the hundreds and remains central to India's long-range air power and regional deterrence. Now, for the Indian Army, its Warhorse tanks, variants of the Russian T-90s, license-built in India's Bhishma, form a significant share of mechanized strength. Now, India continues to buy spares and upgrade kits from Russia, including recent contracts for more powerful engines for the T-90s. And for the Indian Navy too, the submarine-to-carrier pipeline from kilo-class diesel subs as well as aircraft carrier refits, Moscow is integral to New Delhi's naval modernization and its Indo-Pacific posture. Now, even as India diversifies, for example, buying Rafales from France and increasing purchases from the US as well as Israel, Russia still supplied the single largest share of India's arms imports in recent years, making Moscow an indispensable defense partner during a rapid force modernization. Now, Putin's India visit is likely to further strengthen the military equipment trade for coming years, if not decades. But trade lines between Moscow and New Delhi run beyond armed forces. The slippery slope of oil trade has been balanced well too. So if defense is the hard security pillar, energy is the economic spine. Since Western sanctions on Moscow changed global flows in the aftermath of the start of Russia's offensive on Ukraine, India emerged as one of the largest buyers of discounted Russian crude, helping New Delhi secure cheaper feedstock for its refineries as well as meet domestic fuel demand. Bilateral trade has surged. India imports from Russia were recorded at roughly $67 billion in the year 2024, driven largely by crude oil and refined products. In volume terms, Russian crude moving to India in the past year accounted for tens of millions of tons in volume, making Russia at times India's largest supplier, even bigger than the OPEC bloc. Cheaper crude helped reduce India's import bill and kept refinery margins healthy, an important domestic economic consideration for New Delhi. And for Moscow, Indian demand offered a reliable customer amid Western restrictions. But the cozying up of Putin and Modi in this geopolitical environment is unlikely to go down well with the US President Donald Trump, especially in light of ongoing trade deal negotiations between New Delhi and Washington. Here's where posture becomes policy. India's growing security ties with the United States, joint exercises, defense sales, and concerns about China, plus, of course, the trade deal negotiations to potentially wipe out the US-imposed 50% tariff on India, could suggest a push into an American orbit. But New Delhi insists on strategic autonomy. That autonomy is the reason India sustained big purchases from Russia despite US warnings. The 2018 S400 air defense purchase is a case in point. India signed a roughly $5.4 billion deal for 5 regiments despite Washington's sanctions, arguing national security needs and interoperability with existing systems. The US has become a crucial partner, supplying critical platforms and technology, but it does not replace Russia on every front. New Delhi pragmatically hedges, buys Western fighters for some missions, upgrades Russian jets for others, and sources sensors and missiles from multiple partners. So what will the Putin Modi summit deliver? Well, officials say the agenda will mix energy, defense, and economic pledges. New Delhi hopes for clarity on pending defense deliveries, notably the completion timeline for S400 systems and possibly talks on new purchases, including upgrades and even future systems. The two leaders are also likely to announce trade targets and business forum initiatives as both sides publicly eye a multi-decade economic push, even if headline arms packages are limited to firming up delivery schedules rather than blockbuster announcements. In short, the India-Russia partnership is sustained by hardware, energy flows, and a shared interest in independence from easy alignments. Expect this summit to deepen ties, quietly, transaction by transaction, while New Delhi continues to keep one eye on Washington. On why Russia still matters to India, in this part 2, we look at the concrete deals New Delhi could sign this week with Russian President Vladimir Putin arriving in India for the 23rd India-Russia summit. Now, everything from Su-57 stealth fighters to additional S400 squadrons, oil packs and joint production lines. Here's what negotiations and negotiators may walk away with when President Vladimir Putin leaves New Delhi on December 5th. Now, the India-Russia summit is a transaction moment. Both sides arrive with lists, India with a procurement and modernization shopping list, and Russia with an offer book that mixes finished kits, system transfers, and long-term industrial partnerships. Remember, Vladimir Putin is coming with a delegation of business and industry leaders too. Now, what follows is a rundown of the biggest, most realistic items on that list and what they would mean for India and for Russia. Now, top of the headlines, the Su-57 stealth fighter. Multiple reports say India will press Russia to offer a pathway to acquire the Su-57s, initially off-the-shelf exports of the Su-57E, and crucially, a future plan for licensed production and technology transfer to India. A likely structure under discussion. An initial batch delivered from Russian production lines to meet India's and the Indian Air Force's near-term needs, followed by an India-based manufacturing phase under a joint or licensed agreement. Russian outlets and defense analysts say Moscow is prepared to open parts of the Su-57 ecosystem, engines, sensors, avionics, to deeper industrial ties if New Delhi pushes for local manufacturing. But two big caveats remain. First, the Su-57's advanced engine and certain stealth materials are sensitive technology. Any transfer will be gradual and politically fraught. Second, buying a fifth-generation fighter from Moscow could trigger US scrutiny under the CATSA rules and compliance, as well as complicate New Delhi's Western defense cooperation, a trade-off India will have to weigh very carefully. Now, missile defense technology is next. India already contracted the S400 systems years ago. Briefings indicate New Delhi may seek additional S400 squadrons, potentially as many as 5 of them. And these requests are reported in some defense outlets, speaking of multiple new squadrons, plus clarity on pending delivery schedules as well as logistics support. Now, beyond more S400s, headlines also say that India could explore talks on the S500, Russia's next-generation long-range anti-ballistic missile and anti-satellite capable system. Moscow has been willing to discuss advanced systems for friendly partners. India will be cautious, asking for capability briefs, timelines and sustainment arrangements before committing to any additional purchases. Now, for New Delhi, the logic is deterrence depth, layered air and missile defense against high-end threats in the region where Chinese capabilities are rising. For Moscow, additional S400 or S500 sales are strategic and economic lifelines amid very limited Western markets. Now, not all deals are headline grabbers. Except firming up long-running, lower-visibility contracts, engine upgrades for the T-72 and the T-90 tanks, continued spares and avionics upgrades for the Su-30 Mk1 fleet, and maintenance packages that keep India's large Russian origin inventory operational. A recent procurement trend: India buying upgrade kits and engines to extend existing platforms' life, quicker to deliver and cheaper than full platform replacements. Russia benefits from recurring revenues. India keeps its operational continuity. Now, sea power is on the agenda as well. Russia has been a key partner for India's conventional submarine as well as the missile programs. Negotiations could cover more BrahMos missiles, the India-Russia supersonic cruise missile joint venture. In addition to that, additional kilo-class or upgraded diesel-electric submarines, as well as the joint ship maintenance as well as repair arrangements could be on the table. Now remember, the BrahMos joint venture is a template for deeper defense industrial cooperation, production in India, technology sharing on missile seekers and propulsion components, and exports to third countries with mutual approvals. The defense headlines run alongside deep commercial deals. With Rosneft and Lukoil already sanctioned by the United States, energy talks may not dominate trade talks this time. Bilateral trade has run at record levels. Indian embassy data put FY 24-25 trade at roughly $68.7 billion, with imports dominated by Russian energy and refined products. But with more pressure on India to stop buying Russian crude, any future oil deal may be negotiated only after the US or EU brokered peace between Russia and Ukraine finally gets signed. A broader theme: India is pushing not just for imports but for industrialization. Now expect proposals for joint ventures, aircraft assembly lines with the SJ100 single-aisle passenger aircraft manufacturing deal with India's own defense manufacturer HAL. There could be further talks on engine co-development too. In addition to that, missile manufacturing and wider co-production pacts that convert single sales into decades-long industrial relationships. For India, this fulfills its Make in India aspirations and reduces future dependence on imports. And for Russia, it preserves market access while keeping its defense industry economically viable despite US sanctions. Now, what will actually be signed? Expect a mix. MOUs, yes. Delivery timetables, perhaps for equipment already contracted, and framework MOUs for the big-ticket items. These include, like we mentioned, the Su-57s or potentially even the S500s, rather than signed billion-dollar purchase orders. Also remember, the external constraints, US laws like CATSA, EU, as well as the US secondary sanctions on entities buying certain Russian tech or energy, as well as logistics challenges caused by these sanctions. These are likely to weigh in on the Indian side while making these deals with Russia. India will aim to get what it needs while insulating itself from deeper diplomatic costs. We'll be watching the summit closely, and we hope you watched it too right here on News 9.